She was only 7, but she held a secret that could destroy everything. Michael double-checked to make sure he had packed everything his daughter liked in her lunchbox. A star-shaped cheese sandwich, apple slices, and a small container of sprinkles, her favorite treat. "Sophie, breakfast is ready," he called out, adjusting the worn apron that had belonged to his wife. The silence that followed wasn't normal. Usually Sophie would already be chattering about some fantastic dream she'd had, or humming some children's song she had learned at school. Michael frowned, placing the spatula on the counter. "Sophie?" When he found his daughter sitting on the edge of her bed, still in her pajamas, Michael's heart clenched. Sophie, normally radiant with her brown eyes that seemed to smile even before her lips did, was now staring at the floor. Her small fingers nervously clutched the worn-out plush bunny she hadn't let go of since her mother's death 3 years ago. "Sweetheart, is everything okay?" Michael knelt in front of her, trying to catch her eye. "Are you not feeling well?" Sophie shrugged, a gesture totally atypical for a 7-year-old who, until a few weeks ago, couldn't express an idea without expansive gestures. "I don't want to go to school today." The voice came out so low that Michael almost didn't hear it. He gently placed his hand under his daughter's chin, trying to make her look at him. Sophie turned her face away. "Is something going on at school, Sophie? Is someone picking on you?" "No," she answered too quickly. "I'm just tired." Michael felt a chill run down his spine. Sophie had never been a liar. On the contrary, her honesty often caused embarrassing situations in grocery stores when she loudly commented on strangers' appearances. Now, there was something in her eyes, fear, that Michael couldn't decipher. "You know you can tell me anything, right?" Sophie nodded, but her gaze remained fixed on her own feet, which dangled without touching the floor. Michael took a deep breath, checking his watch. They couldn't be late again. His boss was already impatient with his early departures for school meetings and doctor's appointments. "Let's do this. You go today, and if you don't feel well, call me and I'll come pick you up, okay?" As he helped Sophie get dressed, Michael noticed purplish marks on her arm, just above her elbow. When he asked about them, Sophie mumbled something about falling in the playground. The explanation seemed reasonable, but a voice inside him screamed that something was very wrong. In the car, the silence was oppressive. It had been weeks since Sophie had talked about her day, smiled when entering or leaving school, or sang during the drive. In the rearview mirror, Michael watched his daughter looking out the window, her small face marked by a seriousness that no child should bear. When they arrived at the gate of Oakwood Elementary School, Sophie gripped her backpack strap tightly. Michael turned off the engine and turned to look at her. "Hey, sweetheart, you know what I love most about you? Your smile. It reminds me of the sun coming out after the rain." For a moment, a flicker of a smile crossed Sophie's lips, but it disappeared as soon as her eyes turned towards the school entrance. Michael saw her small body stiffen. "I'll be waiting for your call if you need me, okay?" Sophie nodded, giving him a quick hug before getting out of the car. Michael watched as she walked, shoulders slumped, towards the green gate. Something inside him screamed for him to call her back, to take her home and never bring her there again. At that moment, as he watched his daughter enter the school as if entering a cage, Michael had no idea that that day would change his life forever. It was 2 in the morning when the first scream cut through the night. Michael jumped out of bed in an instant, his heart pounding against his chest. Since Anna's death, his sleep had become vigilant, always alert to the slightest noise coming from the next room. "No, please, no." Sophie's voice was pure terror. Michael crossed the hallway in seconds, tripping over his own feet. When he opened his daughter's bedroom door, he found her huddled against the headboard, arms protecting her face, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Sophie, it's me. It's okay, sweetheart." It was just a nightmare. He tried to hug her, but she cowered away as if fearing his touch. "She's going to put me in the dark closet again." Sophie sobbed, trembling uncontrollably. "She's going to say I'm stupid and worthless." "Who, Sophie?" "Who said that?" Michael asked, feeling the blood run cold in his veins. Sophie seemed to realize what she had said and immediately shut down. No one. It was just a dream. For almost an hour, Michael stayed by his daughter's side, stroking her hair until she fell back asleep. But sleep didn't come for him. His daughter's words echoed in his mind like a deafening alarm. The next morning, Sophie was listless during breakfast. When Michael mentioned the nightmare, she fixed her eyes on the cereal bowl as if an important secret were written there. "Sophie, I need you to tell me the truth. Is someone hurting you at school?" "I can't talk," she whispered, tears welling up in the corners of her eyes. "If I tell, you'll be arrested, and I'll be all alone in an orphanage full of rats." "What?" Michael felt as if he had been punched in the stomach. "Who said that?" "Sophie, look at me. No one's going to arrest me. No one's going to take you away from me." Sophie shook her head vigorously. "She said she has powerful friends. That if I open my mouth, you'll suffer the consequences." Her voice was so low that Michael had to lean in to hear. "And that no one would believe me because I'm just a stupid, lying kid." "Who, Sophie? Please, tell me who's doing this." Sophie looked at the door as if she expected someone to be listening on the other side. "Ms. Thompson." Michael felt a wave of nausea. Ms. Thompson was Sophie's homeroom teacher, a middle-aged woman with decades of experience and several awards for teaching excellence. He had met her at parent-teacher conferences. Always formal, always controlled, always talking about Sophie with a smile that now seemed macabre in his memories. She hurts you?" The question came out strangled. Sophie didn't answer, but her eyes, full of fear and shame, said it all. That day, Michael called in sick to work, claiming a family emergency. He couldn't send Sophie to school, not after what he had discovered. While his daughter watched cartoons in the living room, for the first time in weeks looking like a real child, he paced back and forth in the kitchen, his mind racing. His first instinct was to go straight to the school and confront Ms. Thompson. But what if Sophie was confused? What if it was all a misunderstanding? No. The fear in his daughter's eyes was too real. The marks on her arms were too real. The nightmares were too real. But he needed proof. His word against that of a respected teacher wouldn't be enough. Would Sophie be willing to talk to the principal? To the police? Given his daughter's fragile state, Michael doubted it. That's when he noticed the small voice recorder on his desk, a device he used to record ideas for children's stories he made up for Sophie. It was compact, no bigger than a matchbox. A dangerous idea formed in his mind. The next day, as he helped Sophie get ready for school, after a sleepless night weighing his options, Michael picked up her favorite hair clip, a small, colorful unicorn. "Want to wear your lucky clip today?" he suggested, trying to keep his voice casual. Sophie gave a weak smile, the first in days. "It's magic, right?" "More than you know," Michael replied as he carefully attached the small recorder to the inside of the clip. "This clip is going to hold all the sounds around you, like magic. Tonight, we'll listen together to everything it recorded, okay?" Sophie looked confused but nodded. Michael knew he was entering dangerous territory. Recording conversations without consent was illegal, but what else could he do? His daughter was suffering, and he needed to protect her at any cost. As he dropped Sophie off at school, he felt a lump in his throat. He was sending his daughter back to the place that terrified her, just to get proof. What kind of father did that? "It's gonna be okay," he promised, hugging her tightly. Sophie squeezed him back, her small arms holding him as if he were her lifeline. He had no idea of the hell that little device would reveal that night. Michael's hands trembled as he connected the small recorder to the computer. Sophie was already asleep, exhausted after another day that she described only as normal when asked. The audio file, almost 8 hours long, now blinked on the screen, waiting to reveal its secrets. Michael adjusted his headphones and pressed play. The first few minutes were what he expected. The murmur of the classroom, children talking, the sound of chairs being dragged. Soon, Ms. Thompson's voice stood out, calm, controlled, exactly as he knew her from school meetings. For almost an hour, everything seemed normal. The teacher taught math lessons, asked questions, answered doubts. Michael began to question himself. Had Sophie exaggerated? Made things up? The thought made him feel immediately guilty. His daughter had never been one to lie. That's when he heard it. The change in Ms. Thompson's voice was subtle but unmistakable. The gentle tone gave way to something harsh, cutting. "Sophie Castro, what's the answer? We're all waiting for your brilliance." The sarcasm was evident. There was a silence. Then Sophie's hesitant voice. I think it's 24. The sound of something hitting hard, probably a book on the desk, made Michael jump. "Think? You think? We're not here to hear what you think, you stupid girl." Michael felt his stomach churn. The teacher continued, her voice growing in intensity. "Everyone else is finished except you. Always late, always distracted. What's wrong with you, or do you like being the reason everyone waits?" Sophie's voice was almost inaudible. "I'm sorry, Miss Thompson." "Miss Thompson." The voice was pure venom now. "It's Miss Thompson to you, you rude little brat." Michael clenched his fists so tightly that his nails left marks on his palms. The audio continued, revealing horror after horror. During recess, Sophie was kept in the classroom. Michael heard the sound of a door closing, and then Ms. Thompson speaking in a low, controlled tone, even more terrifying than her screams. "Do you know what happens to children who tell lies about their teachers? Their parents go to jail because it's a crime to defame a teacher. And do you know what happens to children without parents? They go to filthy orphanages full of rats and cockroaches. Is that what you want, Sophie?" "No, Miss Thompson." Sophie's voice was pure fear. "Your father already has too many problems, doesn't he? Poor thing, a widower, having to raise a useless child like you. If you tell him anything, you'll ruin his life too. Understand?" "Yes, Miss Thompson. Now let's go to the supply closet to think about what you've done." What followed broke Michael's heart. The sound of his daughter being dragged, the door of a closet closing, and then her muffled sobs in the darkness. For how long? The audio timestamp showed almost 40 minutes. Michael could barely breathe. He fast-forwarded through the audio, finding more episodes throughout the day. Ms. Thompson humiliating Sophie in front of her classmates. Ms. Thompson pulling her arm hard enough to leave marks. The same marks he had seen. Ms. Thompson whispering threats when no one else could hear. "If you tell anyone, I'll make sure your father never sees you again. I have friends at Child Protective Services. They'll take you away from him faster than you can say orphan." When the last file ended, Michael took off his headphones and ran to the bathroom, vomiting violently into the toilet. His whole body trembled. How hadn't he noticed before? How had he sent his daughter day after day to that hell? Sitting on the cold bathroom floor, Michael cried, with anger, with guilt, with pure hatred. But mostly, he cried because his daughter, his little Sophie, had faced this terror alone, believing she was protecting her father. That night, Michael didn't sleep. Instead, he made 3 copies of the recording. One on his computer, one on a flash drive, and another sent to his own email. Then he wrote a detailed email to the school principal, Mr. Davies, attaching a snippet of the recording. In the message, he demanded an immediate meeting the next morning. For the first time in weeks, Michael had a clear purpose: to get justice for his daughter. What he didn't know was that he was only scratching the surface of something much more sordid and dangerous than he could imagine. The school looked different that morning. The same colorful walls, the same educational posters, the same smiling staff, but Michael now saw them through a lens of distrust. How many of them knew? How many saw and chose to ignore it? Sophie was staying with the neighbor, Mrs. Henderson, a 70-year-old woman who adored the girl. Michael couldn't look his daughter in the eyes and send her back to that place. Not after what he had heard. Mr. Davies greeted him with a strained smile. The principal was a tall man with an imposing presence, his grey hair carefully combed back. His office was a display of certificates, awards and photos with local politicians. "Mr. Castro, what an unfortunate situation." He gestured for Michael to sit down. "I listened to the audio you sent. Disturbing, I must say." "Disturbing is an understatement, Principal." Michael could barely control the anger in his voice. "My daughter is being abused, physically and psychologically, by an employee of this institution." Mr. Davies interlaced his fingers on the desk, his face a mask of professional concern. "I understand your outrage, I truly do. But we need to consider all angles here." "What angles?" Michael leaned forward. "I have recorded proof. Proof obtained illegally," Mr. Davies pointed out. "Recording conversations without consent is a crime, Mr. Castro. I'm sure you know that." Michael felt the blood run cold. Was that a veiled threat? "Are you more concerned with how I got the proof than with what it reveals?" "Absolutely not." Mr. Davies sighed dramatically. "But as principal, I need to follow protocols. Ms. Thompson has 30 years of exemplary service, awards, recognitions. You're the first parent to make a complaint of this kind." "The first to get proof," Michael corrected. "I doubt I'm the first to suspect." Something flashed in Mr. Davies's eyes. Irritation? Fear? But his professional smile didn't waver. "We'll launch an internal investigation, of course, but understand that this takes time. In the meantime, I suggest Sophie transfer to another class. We have Ms. Johnson in second grade B who..." "My daughter is not returning to this school until Ms. Thompson is suspended," Michael interrupted firmly. "If you don't take immediate action, I'm going to the police, to the district attorney, to the press, if necessary." That's when the mask fell. Mr. Davies leaned forward, his smile completely disappearing. "Think carefully about what you're doing, Mr. Castro. An accusation of this gravity can ruin the career of a respected professional, and your evidence obtained illegally would likely be dismissed in any court of law." "Are you threatening me?" "I'm advising you." Mr. Davies adjusted his tie. "Besides, a single father who secretly records audio of a classroom full of children, that wouldn't look good for your reputation. Child Protective Services might question your parental abilities." The words hit Michael like a punch. It was exactly what Ms. Thompson had threatened to do, use the system against him to take his daughter away. "You're in this together, aren't you?" Michael felt a chill run down his spine. "You knew all along." Mr. Davies stood up, ending the meeting. "I think you're emotionally distraught, understandable given the circumstances. I suggest you take a few days to think clearly. Sophie is a great student. It would be a shame to lose the school year over a misunderstanding." Michael left the school feeling defeated and worse, terrified. The system that was supposed to protect children was apparently protecting the abusers. Who exactly was he fighting against? In the car, he rested his head on the steering wheel, taking deep breaths to contain the tears of frustration. That's when his phone vibrated, a text message from an unknown number. "You're not the first. You're not alone. If you want help, meet me today at 5 p.m. at the corner coffee shop. Come alone." "See?" Michael looked around, paranoid, searching for who could have sent the message. Who was C? How did they know about his situation? Was it a trap? But what choice did he have? The official channels clearly wouldn't work. He needed allies in this battle, and someone had just reached out. Looking at the photo of Sophie on the car dashboard, smiling as she hadn't done in a long time, Michael knew he couldn't give up. Whoever C was, he would be at the corner coffee shop at 5 p.m. For Sophie, he would even enter the Lion's Den. The corner coffee shop was located on a narrow street in the old downtown of the city. It was a small establishment with shelves of used books on the walls and worn wooden tables. Michael arrived 15 minutes early, choosing a table in the back, from where he could observe the entrance. He ordered a black coffee and waited nervously, constantly checking his watch. Exactly at 5 p.m., a woman walked in. Tall, her black hair tied in a severe bun, thick-framed glasses. She carried a battered leather briefcase and had an air of determination that didn't match the relaxed atmosphere of the cafe. Without hesitation, she walked directly to Michael's table. "Mr. Castro, I'm Cecilia Rossi." "You're C?" Michael asked as she sat down without waiting for an invitation. "Yes." She opened her briefcase, taking out a business card. "I'm an investigative journalist with the City Gazette." Michael took the card, confused. "How did you know about me? About what happened at the school? I have sources within the municipal educational system." Cecilia spoke in a low voice, leaning over the table. "I've been investigating a scheme of abuse and cover-up in schools for almost a year. Your complaint against Ms. Thompson is the tip of a much larger iceberg, Mr. Castro." Michael felt his heart race. "Explain." Cecilia looked around before continuing. "There are at least 7 documented cases of abuse by Ms. Thompson in 3 different schools where she's worked. All covered up, all silenced with threats or strategic transfers." "My God," Michael whispered. "Mr. Davies isn't just an accomplice, he's her protector. The two have a personal relationship, let's say, and Mr. Davies has connections at the Department of Education, at Child Protective Services, even in the City Council. That's why Ms. Thompson feels so safe." Michael squeezed the cup tightly. "Because she has protection." "Exactly." Cecilia nodded. "But your recording changed the game. It's the first concrete evidence we've gotten. The other children were either too traumatized to speak, or they were transferred before we could document anything." Michael closed his eyes, thinking about Sophie and all the other children who had gone through the same terror. "I want to take down these monsters." His voice was firm now. "All of them. That's exactly why I'm here." Cecilia smiled for the first time. "But I need you to understand the risks. They're powerful, they have resources, and they won't hesitate to use everything against you, including your status as a single father. They've already threatened to take my daughter away from me," Michael said bitterly. "That's their tactic," she confirmed. "But I have a plan. We need more evidence, more victims willing to speak, and a solid legal strategy before we publish anything." In the next 2 hours, Michael and Cecilia outlined a detailed plan. The journalist had contacts at the district attorney's office and knew a prosecutor who had been keeping an eye on irregularities in the municipal school system for years. With Michael's recording as initial evidence, they could start an official investigation parallel to the report Cecilia was preparing. Michael also discovered that he wasn't alone. Cecilia put him in touch with other parents through an encrypted messaging group who had gone through similar situations. Some had taken their children out of school, others had been intimidated into silence, and some had simply given up, believing that nothing would change. When he left the coffee shop, it was already night. Michael felt both terrified and hopeful. The battle would be difficult, but now he had allies. Arriving home, he found Sophie and Mrs. Henderson drawing at the kitchen table. Michael's heart clenched as he saw his daughter smiling, a shy but real smile, for the first time in weeks. "Daddy!" Sophie ran to hug him. "Look what I did today." She showed him a drawing of a castle with a dragon outside. Inside the castle, 2 figures holding hands, one big and one small. "Is that us?" Michael asked, holding back tears. Sophie nodded. "It's us in the magic castle where the monsters can't get in." Michael hugged her tightly, meeting Mrs. Henderson's eyes over his daughter's head. The elderly woman smiled sadly, as if she knew exactly what was happening, even without Michael having told her the details. Later, after putting Sophie to bed, Michael received another message from Cecilia. "I got 2 more families willing to testify. The prosecutor wants to meet with us tomorrow. This is going to grow fast. Be prepared." In the darkness of his room, Michael looked at the ajar door leading to Sophie's room. The star-shaped nightlight projected soft shadows on the wall. He had promised his daughter that he would protect her from any monster. He had no idea how much that promise would cost. The following days passed in a whirlwind. Michael had taken a leave of absence from work. Urgent family problems, he told his boss, who, fortunately, didn't ask too many questions. Sophie stayed with Mrs. Henderson while he met with Cecilia, other affected parents, and finally, the prosecutor, Ms. Victoria Campos. At one of these meetings, in the austere room of the district attorney's office, Michael met Lisa and Carlos, parents of Peter, a boy who had been Ms. Thompson's student the previous year. Their account was frighteningly similar. Peter started wetting the bed. He had panic attacks when we talked about school, Lisa recounted, her eyes teary. When we finally got him to talk, we found out that Ms. Thompson left him locked in the supply closet when he got the lessons wrong. We went to the principal's office, Carlos added, the anger evident in his voice. Davies treated us like we were crazy. Ms. Thompson denied everything, and without proof. Well, the word of an 8-year-old boy against an exemplary teacher. Stories like this were repeated. Amanda, a single mother of Julia. Fernando and Denise, parents of Lucas. All with traumatic experiences, all silenced by the system, by shame, by fear. Ms. Campos, a middle-aged woman with keen eyes and a posture that didn't accept challenges, listened attentively to everything, taking notes on her pad. "We have a solid case of systematic abuse," she finally declared. "Mr. Castro's recording, added to the testimonies, gives us a basis to initiate a formal investigation. I'll get warrants to access school records, the filed complaints, everything." Michael felt a weight lifted from his shoulders. Finally, someone in the system was on their side. "How long until Ms. Thompson is suspended?" he asked, thinking of Sophie, who still had nightmares every night. "That's the problem," the prosecutor frowned. "Disciplinary proceedings against public employees are slow. It may take weeks to get a precautionary suspension." Weeks? Michael couldn't hide his despair. "And in the meantime, other children continue under the care of this monster? That's why we need the report." Cecilia intervened. "Public pressure? When the story comes out, the Department of Education will be forced to act more quickly." Everyone agreed with the plan. The investigation would follow official channels, while Cecilia's report would prepare the ground in public opinion. The next morning, Michael received an unexpected call. It was the Human Resources Department of the company where he worked. "Mr. Castro, we would like an urgent meeting this afternoon. There are serious issues to discuss." Michael felt a knot in his stomach. The tone of the HR coordinator's voice made it clear that it was nothing good. As soon as he hung up, his phone vibrated with a message from Cecilia. "Be careful. They're starting to act. Several parents in the group have been called for talks at their jobs today." That was no coincidence. Somehow, Mr. Davies was using his connections to pressure the parents who challenged him. Michael took a deep breath, trying to control the panic. Not only was Sophie's safety at stake, but also his livelihood. When he arrived at the company, he was greeted by the HR coordinator and the CFO. Their faces were masks of false concern. "Michael, we received some concerning information," the director began, uncomfortable. "A municipal school contacted us. It seems you're involved in a delicate situation." "What kind of situation?" Michael asked, maintaining his composure. "Well," the man cleared his throat. "They mentioned illegal recordings, defamation against public officials, aggressive behavior." Michael felt his blood boil. "And you believe that without even asking me?" "We're not taking sides," the HR coordinator interjected quickly. "But understand our position. The company has contracts with the city. We can't get involved in conflicts that could affect your profits," Michael completed bitterly. The meeting ended with a formal warning and a clear, veiled threat. If the problem escalated, Michael's position in the company could be re-evaluated. When he left the building, Michael was shaking with anger. His phone rang again. It was Cecilia. "I just found out that Mr. Davies paid a visit to Child Protective Services this morning. Michael, they're preparing the ground to question your custody." We need to anticipate them. They were attacking on all fronts: his job, his daughter, his reputation. For a moment, Michael considered backing down. It would be so much easier to apologize, transfer Sophie to another school, pretend that nothing had happened. That's when he came home and found Sophie drawing in the living room. She looked up as he entered, her small eyes lighting up for an instant. "Promise you'll never leave me, Daddy?" The innocent question hit Michael like a lightning bolt. No matter the cost, he couldn't back down now. He couldn't betray the trust in his daughter's eyes. "Never, sweetheart. I'll never leave you." That night he called Cecilia. "Let's go forward with everything. No matter what happens to me, publish the report." The report, which occupied 3 full pages, featured edited excerpts from Michael's recording, with Sophie's identity protected, anonymous testimonies from other parents, analyses by psychologists about the impact of abuse on children, and a detailed history of the schools where Ms. Thompson had worked, all with records of sudden student transfers. The article also mentioned the coincidences in Mr. Davies' career, always hiring Ms. Thompson for his schools, and the strange promotions that both received almost simultaneously. At 7:32 a.m., Michael's phone rang. It was Mr. Davies, his voice trembling with fury. "You have no idea what you've just done, Castro. I'm going to destroy you." Michael hung up without answering. Minutes later, he received a message from Cecilia. It started, "Don't answer calls from unknown numbers. The prosecutor is filing a request for the immediate suspension of Ms. Thompson and Mr. Davies. Keep Sophie home." Throughout the day, the story exploded. Other media outlets picked up the cue, amplifying the impact. At 11 a.m., the Department of Education issued an official statement announcing a thorough investigation and the precautionary suspension of Ms. Thompson until the facts are clarified. Mr. Davies, however, remained in his position, a sign that his political connections were still working behind the scenes. Around 2 p.m., Michael received a call that chilled his blood. It was from Child Protective Services, summoning him to an emergency meeting the next day to discuss the situation of Sophie Castro. The counselor on the phone was vague, but the message was clear. The threat of losing custody of his daughter was now real. "They're retaliating," Cecilia confirmed when Michael informed her. "But we expected this. Ms. Campos is already preparing a legal countermeasure. You won't lose Sophie, I promise." Despite the assurances, Michael barely slept that night. Every sound made him jump out of bed, certain that someone was coming to take his daughter. He even piled furniture against the front door, an irrational gesture that he himself recognized but couldn't avoid. In the next room, Sophie slept, oblivious to the storm that was forming around her. Her small body finally relaxed after weeks of constant tension. The meeting at Child Protective Services was exactly what Michael feared, an ambush. 2 of the 5 counselors present were clearly hostile, asking loaded questions about his invasive surveillance methods and his recent erratic behavior. "Mr. Castro, we understand your concern as a father," began a counselor with a stern expression. "But secretly recording children in a school environment, causing public turmoil, creating instability in your daughter's life, that makes us question whether Sophie is in a healthy environment." Michael felt the room spin. They were turning the situation against him, transforming him from protector into threat. That's when the door opened and Ms. Campos entered, followed by 2 assistants carrying folders. "I apologize for the delay," she announced without looking even a little sorry. "But I believe this meeting shouldn't even be happening without my presence." During the next hour, the prosecutor methodically dismantled every argument against Michael. She presented sworn statements from psychologists attesting to Sophie's trauma and Michael's appropriate response as a protective father. She showed legal precedents protecting parents who acted in defense of their children. And finally, she made it clear that any action against Michael's custody would be seen as retaliation and obstruction of justice. "And I must inform you," she concluded, looking directly at the most hostile counselors, that we are investigating links between members of this board and the school administration under investigation. Any undeclared conflict of interest will be treated with the full force of the law. The meeting ended without any action against Michael. In the hallway, he almost collapsed with relief. "You were right," said Ms. Campos as they left the building. "They're all connected. Davies, Thompson, 2 CPS counselors, even a city councilman on the education committee. It's bigger than we imagined. What do we do now?" "We keep pushing," the prosecutor smiled, determined. "Public opinion is on our side. More families are coming forward. Their castle is crumbling, Mr. Castro." But Michael knew that a cornered animal is when it becomes most dangerous, and Mr. Davies still had enough power to cause damage. The next morning, another bombshell. Michael was fired. The official justification was departmental restructuring, but the timing made the real reason clear. His boss, embarrassed, couldn't even look him in the eyes as he handed him the termination letter. At home, sitting at the kitchen table with the termination letter in one hand and bills to pay in the other, Michael felt the weight of the world on his shoulders. How would he support Sophie now? How would he keep up the fight against the system that seemed determined to crush him? That's when he heard Sophie's voice coming from the living room, humming softly while drawing, something she hadn't done in months. When he approached, he saw that she was drawing a family, her father, and several other adults and children around them. "Who are all these people, sweetheart?" "They're our friends," Sophie answered simply. "Aunt Cecilia, Ms. Campos, Mrs. Henderson, Peter and his parents, everyone who's helping us fight the monsters." Michael felt the tears burn his eyes. How could his 7-year-old daughter see so clearly what he was losing sight of? They weren't alone in this fight. They never had been. That night, the group of parents met in Michael's small apartment. They brought food, offered support, and surprisingly, money. A collection, organized in a hurry to help him while he was unemployed. "You risked everything for your daughter," said Amanda, Julia's mother. "Now it's our turn to support you." While the children played in Sophie's room, the adults planned their next move. Cecilia's report had opened doors, but Mr. Davies still resisted, protected by his political connections. "We need to go higher," Cecilia suggested, "directly to the superintendent of education. With all this public pressure, he can't ignore the case." Ms. Campos agreed. "Tomorrow we'll have a hearing with him, and we're taking all of you, all the parents, all the children. We'll show the real faces behind this story." When everyone left, it was past midnight. Michael sat on the edge of Sophie's bed, watching her sleep. For the first time in a long time, she seemed at peace, without nightmares, without startling. "We're almost there, sweetheart," he whispered, tucking the blanket around her. "The monsters aren't going to win." That morning, however, the access stairs were taken over by an unusual crowd. Dozens of parents and children, some holding handmade signs, others simply joining their voices in a chorus of indignation. "Protect our children! No more abuse! Thompson and Davies out!" Michael held Sophie's hand tightly as he climbed the steps. Around him, families who had previously suffered in isolation now formed a united front. The local media was present in force. The demonstration, organized on social media overnight, had become a must-see event. Cecilia coordinated the journalists, ensuring that each family had a voice. Ms. Campos led the group, her confident posture clearing a path among security guards and aides. "The superintendent can't receive all of you." A nervous aide tried to block the entrance. "We have protocols, schedules. He will receive representatives of these families now," Ms. Campos replied, unwavering. "Or he'll explain to the press why he's ignoring reports of child abuse in his schools." 15 minutes later, Michael, Amanda, Carlos, and Lisa were led to the office of Superintendent Harris, a middle-aged man with deep circles under his eyes and an expression of someone who would rather be anywhere else. "I understand the gravity of the situation," he began, after hearing a summary presented by the prosecutor. but we need to follow the appropriate procedures. Ms. Thompson is already on administrative leave. What about Mr. Davies? Michael interjected. He's the root of the problem. He protects abusers, intimidates families, uses political connections to cover up crimes. The superintendent adjusted his tie, uncomfortable. Principal Davies has an exemplary service record. Without concrete evidence of his involvement, here's your evidence. Ms. Campos placed a flash drive on the table. Testimonies from former school employees revealing how Davies threatened to fire them if they reported Thompson. Records of suspicious student transfers, and more recently, evidence that he used public resources to harm the parents who reported abuse. The superintendent paled visibly. This is very serious, and it's just the tip of the iceberg. Cecilia, who had joined them, added, "My next report, published tomorrow if there's no immediate action, shows how this scheme extends to other schools, possibly involving employees of this very department." The implicit threat was clear. The scandal could climb another level in the hierarchy, potentially reaching the superintendent himself. Mr. Harris stared at everyone in the room, weighing his options. Finally, he sighed deeply and picked up the phone. "Regina, please issue an order now removing Principal Davies from his duties pending the outcome of the investigation, and schedule a press conference for 2 p.m. When they left the office, they were greeted with applause and hugs from the other families waiting in the hallway. Sophie, who had stayed with Mrs. Henderson during the meeting, ran into her father's arms. "Did we do it, Daddy?" Michael hugged her tightly. "We're doing it, sweetheart. The monsters are losing." The press conference, held a few hours later, was a turning point. The superintendent, now positioning himself as a champion of children, announced the removal of Mr. Davies and the creation of a special commission to investigate reports of abuse throughout the municipal system. "This administration has zero tolerance for any form of violence against our children," he declared, looking sincerely indignant, although just hours before he had been trying to minimize the case. Ms. Campos seized the moment to announce that the district attorney's office was expanding the investigation, seeking similar patterns in other schools. After the press conference, as the families celebrated in the gardens of the department, Michael felt a touch on his shoulder. It was a woman he didn't know, appearing about 40 years old, with tired eyes and a hesitant smile. "Mr. Castro, I'm Diana Olson. I was a teaching assistant in Ms. Thompson's class 2 years ago." Michael shook her hand, intrigued. "I saw you on TV," she continued, her voice low. "What you did, what all of you did. It was brave. I tried to report Thompson once. I wrote an anonymous letter to the department. Weeks later, I was transferred to a school in the suburbs with no structure, no working conditions. Mr. Davies?" She nodded. "He called me into his office before the transfer. He said he knew about the letter and that I should be grateful for not being fired. He said that no one would believe me against Thompson and that, well, that accidents happen to teachers who don't know their place." Michael felt a chill. A direct threat. Exactly. Diana looked around, still apprehensive. "I have a diary. I wrote down everything I saw in Thompson's class, dates, children's names, incidents. I kept it hidden all these years, afraid, but now I think it can help." As Diana walked away, promising to hand over the diary to Ms. Campos the next day, Michael realized that the network of silence was breaking down. People who had previously been too scared to speak now found courage in the example of others. That night, Michael's house hosted a small celebration. Cecilia, Ms. Campos, the families who had become allies, even Mrs. Henderson with her homemade cookies, all gathered to celebrate the first real victory. Sophie, for the first time in a long time, played animatedly with the other children. Her eyes had regained some of the brightness that Michael missed so much. However, as he watched his daughter interact with Peter and Julia, Michael noticed that there were still shadows in her gestures. A startle when someone spoke too loudly. An insecure look when an adult approached too quickly. The scars of trauma were still there, invisible but painful. "It will take time," said Amanda, seemingly reading his thoughts. "Julia still has nightmares, even after 6 months in another school. But they're getting less frequent. The important thing is that now they know they're not alone," added Carlos, "that someone fought for them, that someone believed in them." Michael nodded, feeling a lump in his throat. The battle was far from over. Mr. Davies and Ms. Thompson would still have their defenders. The system would still try to protect itself. But something fundamental had changed. The silence had been broken. Later, when everyone had left, Michael found Sophie asleep on the couch. As he picked her up to carry her to bed, she sleepily opened her eyes. "Daddy, the monsters aren't coming back, are they?" Michael kissed her forehead. "If they come back, we'll face them together, I promise." Sophie smiled, snuggling against her father's chest before falling back asleep. Michael remained for a long time holding his daughter, feeling her small heart beating against his, remembering what really mattered in the end. 3 weeks had passed since Mr. Davies's removal. The story had gained national attention, with major media outlets reproducing Cecilia's report and expanding the debate about child abuse in school environments. Sophie's return to school, now with an interim principal and a new teacher, was gradual and careful. Michael accompanied her on the first days, staying at the school, observing from afar. The new teacher, Ms. Carter, was patient and gentle, allowing Sophie to readjust at her own pace. "She's doing well," Ms. Carter commented to Michael after a week. "She's still quiet during group activities, but I already see small progress. Today she raised her hand to answer a science question." Small victories, Michael thought. That's how they measured progress now. A hesitant smile, a question asked without fear, a night without nightmares. At home, things were still difficult financially. Michael had gotten some freelance graphic design work, his area of expertise, but it wasn't enough to cover all the expenses. Still, the community that had formed around them continued to offer support, from rides to school to shared meals. "We need to find a steady job for you," insisted Mrs. Henderson, who had practically adopted Michael and Sophie as family. "My nephew has a print shop downtown. I'll talk to him." The case against Thompson and Davies was moving slowly through legal channels. Both had hired expensive lawyers, another sign of the mysterious resources they possessed, and were doing everything to delay the proceedings. On a cold Tuesday morning, Michael received a call from Cecilia. "We need to talk in person. Can I come to your apartment this afternoon?" There was urgency in her voice. Michael agreed, worried. What else could happen? When the journalist arrived, accompanied by Ms. Campos, Michael knew that the matter was serious. "We received a proposal last night," began the prosecutor, getting straight to the point. "Davies's and Thompson's lawyers want a deal." "What kind of deal?" Michael asked, suspicious. "They give up their careers in education, surrender their licenses, and in exchange, the criminal investigation is dropped." "That's absurd," Michael exploded. "After everything they've done, they simply walk off into the sunset without consequences." "Technically, giving up their careers is a consequence," argued Ms. Campos, although her tone indicated that she wasn't satisfied either. "And they could never work with children again." Michael shook his head, indignant. "What about the children they traumatized? Sophie still wakes up screaming some nights. Peter is panicked by enclosed spaces. Julia can't trust authority figures." Cecilia sighed, running her hand through her hair. "I agree with you, Michael, but we need to be pragmatic. A criminal trial can take years, with uncertain results. During all that time, the children would have to relive the trauma, possibly testify. And there's another problem," added Ms. Campos. "Davies's protection network goes beyond what we imagined. We received indications that they're trying to push the case to a specific judge, someone with whom Davies has family connections." Michael felt as if the floor disappeared under his feet. Even with all the evidence, with all the public exposure, the system still found ways to protect its own. What's plan B then? That's exactly why we're here, said Cecilia, opening her briefcase. We found something in Diana's diary, a clue that led us to investigate Davies and Thompson's personal finances. She spread some documents on the table, bank statements, contracts, property records. They have much more money than their salaries would justify, much more. Davies owns 3 luxury apartments and a beach house. Thompson has substantial investments and an imported car. Bribery? Michael asked, beginning to understand. Worse, Ms. Campos pointed to one of the documents. Misappropriation of school funds, overbilling on cafeteria and teaching material contracts, even appropriation of donations intended for educational projects. We're talking about millions diverted over the years, added Cecilia. And the best part, involving other people in the Department of Education, including the former superintendent, now a city councilman. Michael began to grasp the strategy. So instead of focusing on the abuses, which are harder to prove in court, we follow the money, confirmed the prosecutor. Financial crimes leave clear documentary trails, and the penalties can be equally severe. We want your approval before changing the focus of the investigation, explained Cecilia. After all, it all started with you and Sophie. Michael reflected for a few minutes. In the end, what really mattered? That Thompson and Davies were punished in some way, that they could never hurt other children again, and that the system that protected them was exposed. Let's go this route, he decided, but with one condition. I want them to be forced to make a public apology to the children and families, not because of their punishment, but so that the children hear that it wasn't their fault, that the adults were wrong. The 2 women exchanged glances of admiration. We'll include that in the negotiation, promised Ms. Campos. However, as he watched his daughter interact with Peter and Julia, Michael noticed that there were still shadows in her gestures. A startle when someone spoke too loudly, an insecure look when an adult approached too quickly. The scars of trauma were still there, invisible but painful. It will take time, said Amanda, seemingly reading his thoughts. Julia still has nightmares, even after 6 months in another school. But they're getting less frequent. The important thing is that now they know they're not alone, added Carlos, that someone fought for them, that someone believed in them. Michael nodded, feeling a lump in his throat. The battle was far from over. Mr. Davies and Ms. Thompson would still have their defenders. The system would still try to protect itself. But something fundamental had changed. The silence had been broken. Later, when everyone had gone, Michael found Sophie asleep on the couch. As he picked her up to carry her to bed, she sleepily opened her eyes. Daddy, the monsters aren't coming back, are they? Michael kissed her forehead. If they come back, we'll face them together. I promise. Sophie smiled, snuggling against her father's chest before falling back asleep. Michael remained for a long time holding his daughter, feeling her small heart beating against his, remembering what really mattered in the end. A year had passed since it all began. Autumn had again painted the trees in the park across from Michael and Sophie's apartment with color, and the mornings once again had that fresh breeze that announced changes. Changes. That word summed up well what they had lived through. The small living room was full of stacked boxes, some already closed with packing tape, others still open, waiting for the last items. Michael checked the list on his phone one more time, making sure they weren't forgetting anything important for the move. Sophie, did you put your favorite books in your travel backpack? Yes, Daddy, the animated voice came from the bedroom. And I also put Mr. Bunny and Mum's picture in. Michael smiled. Little by little, Sophie was returning to being that talkative and lively girl. The nightmares had decreased considerably. The weekly consultations with the child therapist recommended by Ms. Campos were helping her process the trauma. The court case had been concluded 2 months ago. Mr. Davies was sentenced to 12 years in prison for embezzlement, racketeering, and witness tampering. Ms. Thompson received a sentence of 8 years, with aggravating factors for abuse of authority against minors. As part of the agreement, both recorded videos apologizing to the victims, videos that, by the parents' decision, would only be shown to the children when the therapists deemed it appropriate. Most importantly, the city's child protection system underwent a complete overhaul. New rules for hiring and supervising teachers were implemented. Anonymous reporting channels were created, and at the insistence of the group of parents led by Michael, all schools now had trained psychologists to identify signs of abuse. The doorbell rang, interrupting Michael's thoughts. It was Cecilia, carrying a box of donuts. "Farewell gift," she said, entering the apartment. "I couldn't let you leave without one last treat." Behind her came Mrs. Henderson, visibly emotional, holding a handmade quilt for the cold nights in the new house. In a few minutes, the apartment was full. Amanda and Julia, Carlos, Lisa and Peter, and even Ms. Campos, always so formal, showed up with a vase of flowers to bring life to the new home. Sophie ran among the adults, showing off her latest drawings, talking animatedly about the new school where she would study. Her eyes sparkled with a joy that, months before, Michael feared he would never see again. "Are you sure you need to go so far?" Mrs. Henderson asked for the 10th time that week. "It's a new opportunity," Michael explained gently. "The design studio in San Diego will give me the freedom to work on projects that really matter to me. And Sophie will love living near the beach." What he didn't say, but everyone understood, was that Sophie needed a new beginning, a place without painful memories, where she wasn't the girl from the abusive teacher case. "You're always invited to visit," he added, hugging the elderly woman who had become practically a grandmother to Sophie. "And you're coming back for Peter's birthday, right?" Lisa asked, already with tears in her eyes. "We wouldn't miss it for anything," Sophie replied, before her father could even speak. That's how it was now. They had formed an extended family, united by a battle that no one would want to face, but that, in some way, had brought a special kind of unity. Cecilia pulled Michael into a corner while the children showed Mrs. Henderson an improvised choreography. "It came out today," she said, showing her tablet. "The Department of Education officially implemented the Sophie Protocol." Michael quickly read the article. The new set of guidelines, named in honor of his daughter, although without using her last name to protect her privacy, established clear steps for investigating reports of abuse in a school environment, ensuring protection for victims and whistleblowers. "It's a good legacy," he said, his voice choked with emotion. "It's your legacy," Cecilia corrected, "and Sophie's. You two changed the system." Before Michael could respond, Sophie called him from the balcony. "Daddy, come see! There's a rainbow!" Everyone gathered on the small balcony, squeezing together to see the colorful arch that formed in the partially cloudy afternoon sky. Sophie, in her father's arms, had her face lit up with admiration. "It's a sign of good luck for our trip," she declared with the conviction that only an 8-year-old could have. Michael squeezed her against his chest, feeling her small, strong heart beating next to his. He thought about everything they had gone through, the fear, the anger, the despair, and how, even in the darkest moments, he had never really lost hope. Because he had Sophie, and Sophie had him, courageous together. "Yes, sweetheart," he whispered into her hair. "It's a new beginning." Hours later, when everyone had left and Sophie was sleeping in her partially disassembled room, Michael sat among the boxes in the living room, looking at a photo of his daughter laughing on the beach during a weekend trip a few weeks before. The journey hadn't been easy. The scars, visible and invisible, would remain. But looking at that smile, at that genuine joy that was finally returning to his daughter's eyes, Michael knew it had been worth it. Every tear, every sleepless night, every battle against a system that seemed insurmountable. Because in the end, it wasn't about beating a system or punishing monsters. It was about a silent promise made when he held Sophie in his arms for the first time, that he would protect her at any cost, that he would fight for her against any threat, even if that threat wore badges of authority or hid behind positions and titles. And more importantly, it was about showing Sophie that small voices can indeed be heard, that the truth, however painful, deserves to be told, that asking for help is not weakness, but courage. Tomorrow they would embark on their new life. There were fears and uncertainties, of course, but for the first time in a long time, there was also hope, that luminous hope that only arises after the most intense storms, like an unexpected rainbow on the horizon. And that, Michael concluded, putting the photo in the last box, was more than enough for now. If this story touched you, subscribe for more heartwarming narratives that explore the strength of family bonds and the courage needed to face injustice. What would you do in the protagonist's place? Would you have Michael's same courage to face an entire system for love of his daughter? Comment below.